Okay, so we need to talk. Yes, it's Friday, and Friday is kind of where the emotions of the week clear themselves out. It's also my birthday week, and so it's given me a lot of pause to think. And this week I signed a contract with a legal firm that will be representing me and supporting me for a criminal injury case for historic abuse. So I'm going to be talking about these matters. If you feel that it's too much, check out. You don't have to watch the whole video. Or if you want to just take it in bite sized pieces, I'm not going to be really graphic. Um, and to stop and to take some care to look after yourself, that's also fine. I'll also put some support line resources down below. Um, so, this is the culmination of years of not knowing that I could actually seek recourse in some form. And probably just over a year ago, I connected with a group called Samson Survivors and Mates Support Network. This is me in my 50s, but of course, my disclosure and being open about what happened actually occurred really early on, which is a bit atypical, yeah? Um, but let me tell a little bit of the story. So, I was still living with my mum and my brother in a rental property in River Road in Kelmscott. When things were getting intense, I must have been about, I don't know, 18, 17, 18. I'd gone back to school after having dropped out and I went to a different school where things were a lot more stable and focused on education, not like the school that I'd battled my way through. I was always a good student, but that school was under resourced, had social conflicts, teachers that were disengaged, not all of them, of course. Staff student ratio um, was off the planet. Yeah, it was the biggest public school in Western Australia and plagued with problems. Um, so I ended up going to Canning College, but I had to get 3 buses from where I lived in the outer suburbs of Perth to be able to go to Canning College, which is kind of right near Curtin University. And for me, this was another world. I'd never really been in those parts, and certainly not every day to study. So I started to connect with other people who seemed to like me, but it was a world away from my existence in the outer burbs, in the very dry, exposed areas of Kelmscott and Westfield. At home, my mom and my brother had conflicts between themselves. There was a lot of ex- unexpressed anger that kind of meant a repetition of dynamics that we'd grown up with. I won't go any further into that. But I just found it really hard to go back home, and I was very triggered by that, and again, caught up in cycles. Um, but years earlier, before um, just mum leading the household and carrying us all in tow, and there were more of us at that stage when my parents actually finally split. When I was about 12, there was 5 of us. Years earlier, even before the split, that's where the abuse started. And I have a family member that remembers seeing it. She's gone on record about this. Very ritualistically done. I must have been kind of 8 or 9. I know it was before my brother died, my older brother, and before the divorce. But after the divorce and after the relocation to Westfield, um, my dad actually had access privileges. And unfortunately, in spite of my mum trying to press charges against him for nearly killing her, um, the court upheld his version that she'd just fallen and that's why she had a cut on her forehead and concussion. And that basically is what men use all the time to gain control of the narrative and also potentially the children. He wanted full custody, but in this instance, access. There was a bit of bought peace from relocating and not having that presence in our home. But I was still experiencing what was trauma. Somatically, I would have obviously nightmares, but also like bodily manifestations of something pressing down on me. And this is not like sleep paralysis because I was actually awake, trying to sleep, and all sorts of kind of weird phenomena around that. So this was in my early teens, but particularly when, I don't want to call him dad because I don't see him as my dad retrospectively, because what kind of father does this? When he had access visits that didn't include the other siblings, that's when he used this for another form of access. It's not every day that someone has a deep knowledge of what their father looks like down below, right? That's not normal. So I'm not going to go further with that, but you know, for a child verging on teenagehood, and I was very little and feminine, that's a kind of carnal knowledge that you cannot even make sense of because you don't even know anything about sexuality. And it really distorted for me my sense of self and safety and God knows the whole gamut, right? But the reason why I'm talking about this is I have to give account of all the details for the legal process. And it's common knowledge in my family because when I was old enough to sort of become independent and sort of get out of the tense situation in that rental home, having finished year 12, I was able to move to Fremantle. Yes, C, representing freedom. But there were two bombs that I dropped. One, that I wasn't heterosexual, which is still true to this day, because I'm a lesbian. And two, that this had happened. And the fallout from that was not so much negation, which can happen to victim survivors, which is awful, by the way. If that's been your situation, I truly empathize with you, because for me, the kind of forms of negation also have come later. Yeah? Even decades later, even though it was a known fact that this happened in my life and recognized at the time, one sibling denies both the domestic violence and my own story. And if they're listening, I'll leave it at your feet. But anyway, to cut a long story short, because I am kind of beating around the bush, I'm 19 by that stage, and my mum was just shocked, and she said it was just condemnable that her former husband would have done that. She sort of offered a gesture of moral support, I guess, as did other siblings, who I guess were also shocked, but we have to remember that we all grew up with really severe cases of traumatic episodes and expressions of aggression, an environment of fear. So I think that they were just trying to make do and get on in their best capacities with their own lives. And so they didn't really have the mental space to take it all in and maybe take me under their wing. And my instinct was to fucking cut loose and run, which I did. Since I felt like there was nowhere to turn, I followed a friend who had a similar background story and also went to school with me, and she'd taken off to Melbourne, and I decided to move to Melbourne after she had, and I stayed with her. But I was thrown into the cold. Melbourne is cold, but like absolutely no um, support. I'd stopped speaking to my mum and I'd definitely cut off my dad. His entire family, including especially his sister, may she rest in peace, she basically said I wasn't welcome at her home, and basically, any claims I made about the father were dismissed and the product of someone that's angry and trying to be vengeful. Even a cousin said that I was very angry. No one really understood. And when I went to Casa House, the Centre Against Sexual Assault in the CBD, I believe it's still there in Melbourne, they found it really hard to interpret because they're like, but this doesn't line up with the people that we serve. And so they referred me to a men's group, which was such a disaster because, first of all, that's not me. And second of all, my abuser was male. So I just encountered these older men that wanted to hug me and everything like that, and it didn't feel safe. So I took off, cut loose again, and instead I saw a lesbian feminist, a red feminist who made an exception and included me because she understood that what I had experienced was a form of familial and gendered violence. So props to Heike Linden Weber, because that was really pivotal. That was the only support I had to process some of this. And when I ended up not having housing and at risk of cycles of homelessness, even Hanover Welfare Services, they probably put it down in their logbook, family ostracism or distance due to disclosure of sexuality and disclosure of abuse. They didn't refer me to any legal services either. Casa House should have immediately told me to make a police report, or at least opened up that option. And the same with Hanover Welfare Services. And the emphasis then, I think broadly in the sector, was we have to look after your material needs, which is why you're here, and focus on the present, get you stable, and not look back into those parts of your so-called past. Because survivors, that past still recursively replays because of trauma. People didn't understand or have a trauma-informed focus back then. So I received no psychological referral, no legal support, nothing of the kind. Instead asked implicitly to just keep that under wraps and try to focus on being in an upward move to recover materially and socially in my life. So that's quite a long part of the story, the beginnings of it all. I guess I kind of went lockstep with that and decided that I needed to be able to just concentrate on the future, present and the future. But I still had a lot of instability and, again, no support from parents. I reconnected with my mother when I was less angry, and that kind of normalized a bit more our relations, but not with my father. Not until many years later when he was sick. And I wrote a letter to him saying that we could only be in touch if he agreed not to argue about whether the abuse had happened or not, and that if he summoned that up, I would cut him right off. The terms were limited access, like limited contact. I allowed him to call me now and then. It was a very different period of my life. I was in my 30s by then, and I'd gotten a stable job. In a way, being queer and everything, like, and having supposedly achieved things in life, no one got to see all of my instability and my sex work history and everything like that. Once I end up being a so-called success, then it's a bit more palatable, the stories that you tell about yourself. The history of abuse, I both kind of parked because of institutional and social discourses of the time saying basically you needed to not focus on that instead of seeing me as being someone with rights for redress, right? This is pre the 2011 Royal Commission. So I just don't think that our culture was ready. So I'm not angry at those people, but it takes decades later to connect with a group like Samson, albeit I am trans and I'm not male identified, um, to really truly grasp not just my rights, but all the dimensions of how this has affected me and affects others. To be in a room with other people for whom the command that we can't look at this, we can't speak about it implicitly, right, is removed, and where we can actually speak. So this goes beyond the personal, it goes into how families function, how violence is normalized, including domestic violence, and secrets are supposedly to be kept. It was never my secret. That's one of the things I learned from Samson. It was something I was groomed into, and the secret, the shame, was actually born on the abuser, the perpetrator, not me. This is the way we get free, right? And begin to reintegrate and heal and be in recovery. So there's not too many voices of trans survivors, of assigned male at birth survivors, of male survivors. And this is the whole point of me talking about these things. Notwithstanding that there's an individual in my family who initially embraced at least the narrative side of things and wrote about it, indeed has a poem dedicated to me under my former name that's called The Atonement. So a kind of testimony, and used my story, the stories of other people in the family as well, to create a book which was a landmark in launching her career, and appraised very sympathetically, seen as being an important feminist voice. This particular individual is the only one of my siblings who has refused support, even moral, for my legal process right now, and has also said that my statements about ongoing DV growing up were distortions, picking bones with me, saying you claimed that mum was beaten every day, and saying it was actually just really shouting, not ongoing DV. This is actually being weaponized because, on top of that, she said that I'd retracted the claims of abuse, including when I visited my father with her after having written that letter saying, I will only have contact with you if you don't challenge me on these things. It's incredible the damage that can occur in families. Survivors need justice, not re-traumatization and secondary harm, which is what systems often enact, either by denial or by erasure, not providing that support, including when you seek it out, bravely going on your own. We need to have a community that bands together for healing justice. And to that individual who wrote about it and latterly has blindsided me by saying that it's all distortions and basically trying to shift the ground and say I have no authority even in my memories. It's like straw man's argument, isn't it? The beating didn't happen every day. It was only yelling, trying to undermine, what a neighbour has attested as being constant. Where my mum also would hide in the garden when the shouting began, and say, "Please don't hurt me," right? And aligning with my dad's statements after the charges were pressed against him because of that incident where she was knocked out cold, and where there's clinical evidence of extensive bruising and a cut in her forehead, that it was just that she fell against an object. That's the ultimate anti-feminist stance. This person maybe is curating or reworking, revising this because of their desire to have an image of a father that was kindly or that had light and dark, but that she will embrace, while then saying, I'm a necessary sacrifice. And indeed, that poem sort of works on those lines. You know what? It wasn't too late to buy anything back. It's never too late to use her words. She says it's just a poem. It's not a document. Well, why did you use our experiences? Maybe even combine them with your own, or create a story that's a gothic fairy tale to do that, instead of seeing this as a matter of justice then and now. I put that to this individual, if they're watching. I've actually written to them separately and asked them to apologise, but that's not forthcoming. Family can be sources of harm. Not all family members, of course, because all of my other siblings support me. They really do. And they know. They know what's at stake. They know what we went through. They know what it's like to survive. They don't try to pull rank and pick on someone's words and try to basically dismiss them out of the picture, burn them, because it's an inconvenient set of truths, as attested to by my mum's neighbour, who gave us refuge on one of those nights of aggression. My dad was a known abuser. And in fact, one individual in the family who'd also been exposed to his abuse, she filed a police report. So she managed to be able to do that, right? With the support of her mum. So I stand on the side of truth. This family member who has burnt me and created forms of secondary harm, they are the person on whom the responsibility lies or sits. I gave them an opportunity, and yet I was called extremely damaging to speak as a survivor. Yeah, including in public spaces, because in this culture we're also told, do not air the dirty family laundry. Loyalty at all costs to the law of the father. And she's also a revisionist in how she even writes about our father these days. It's such a sanitized image. No one should lie and create a false image of someone else and then write about it. These questions go to the heart of the problems in our society, in violence against women and in the terror inflicted by men also against children in these contexts. There has to be redress, and there has to be justice, and there has to be an account that accurately captures that within the context of settler colonial Australia and all of its legacies. Thanks for listening, and take care.